everyone, Professor King here. In this video, I'm going to be discussing Manning Marable's Mapping Black Political Culture. So it's going to be a short video. I just have some questions for you to either respond to once you've done the reading, or perhaps if you watch this video before you read, to consider while you're reading. And that way, when you're highlighting, underlining, boxing unfamiliar words and defining them, rereading them in context, all those things we're supposed to do when we read actively. While you're doing that, you can think about these questions and kind of find the answers to them, not in a sort of like scavenger hunt kind of way. I know a lot of times when we learn how to read when we're younger, we get those kind of questions and then we just kind of search for the answer. When you get to the college level, the answers aren't always necessarily like, sentence 3 of paragraph 6. Sometimes you have to read the whole piece in order to get sort of a general overall understanding of the answers to the questions that you're asked, because they're higher level questions. It's higher level analysis that you're doing. And so it's not like that sort of searching game that you're used to probably from like middle school and high school. So keep that in mind. Some of these questions will have broader, more complex responses than just like, oh, here's the line right here. If you find lines that support the answers to the questions, that's great, right? Highlight them, make a note of them, respond to them in your own way. But like I said, don't expect anymore for it to be like the easy way out. So that being said, I'll take it to a share screen again. This is going to be a relatively short video because I just have the questions here. So Manning Marable was he was a writer, a thinker. I actually got to see him speak when I was in college. So if that tells you, about the time that he was really big in the sort of academic scholarly world, probably about 20 years ago was when he was at his height. And he has since passed. He's no longer with us, but a lot of his ideas and legacy, particularly regarding Black politics, regarding the prison industrial complex, regarding sort of a skepticism of late stage capitalism, all of these things, especially as it applies to race, all of these things are still being discussed today. So he's not too far back there. He's still very relevant. So this is a little more challenging text, but it is in a book that you can buy at Barnes and Noble. So I'm not gonna, we have to familiarize ourselves and get more comfortable with reading these challenging texts if we want to be able to engage in the academic and scholarly environment. So keep that in mind. So here are some questions as you're reading or after you've read that you should be able to respond to, again, in a worthwhile way, not in a just, here I found a quote, right? But in really using your skills of analysis to think of complex, more thorough, richer answers to these questions. The first one is some historical facts you learned while reading this text. Because he shares a lot and he goes through a lot of things. And so kind of connecting the dots perhaps between and among those historical facts and sort of seeing what the thread that he's drawing through them is, that might be helpful. The next question is, what was challenging for you? Was it a discussion of a particular historical phenomenon? Was it a particular word or phrase that you had to look up? Several words or phrases, but make note of what was challenging for you. Because again, we want to get out of that mode of context clues. And what I mean by that is like the old model of context clues was like, oh, just read over the word and kind of assume what you think it means based on the words around it. Don't do that anymore. Look up the word because sometimes our assumptions are wrong, right? There's like that old saying about when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me, right? So instead of assuming what these words mean based on context clues, actually look them up and then again, reread them in context. So that way, again, you have a definitive, a clear, a thorough understanding of what this person is talking about. Does it take longer to read? Yes. But are you supposed to contribute the 4 unit hours plus the 8 unit hours outside of those 4 unit hours, which means 12 unit hours a week to doing this stuff? Also, yes. So you got time, right? You've got time to read this piece and to respond thoroughly and scholarly to it. Okay, the next question is, what, according to Marable, are the historical and political differences and similarities of integrationism and Black nationalism? Well, if those terms were challenging for you in the previous bullet point, those are definitely terms that you want to make sure you understand: integrationism and Black nationalism. And then once you know them, when he starts talking about them, you should be able to find out what he considers the differentiation between the two. Now, Marable is clearly part of a conversation that people like Angela Davis, Ava DuVernay, the director of 13th, Michelle Alexander, the author of, can I think of it? We just read it. Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow, and James Baldwin. You know, these people are all in essentially, again, this eternal historical conversation with one another and with hundreds, if not thousands, of other thinkers and writers. So if Marable's in this conversation, again, this sort of eternal, historical, ongoing conversation about race, about equality, about justice, about law, about the law, right? About the social contract, if we think back to Rousseau, of all these things, how is his contribution similar to and different from those other intellectuals' arguments, meaning Davis, DuVernay, Alexander, and Baldwin? How's he, you know, in other words, if we were to draw a Venn diagram of them, where would he overlap with Davis, DuVernay, Alexander, and or Baldwin, and where would his own bubble kind of stand apart? Again, when you think about a conversation, if, you know, if the person next to me, if Professor Sabot says, you know, I think that, I don't know, what would she say? I think that green is the ugliest color of highlighter. And then she stopped talking and I said, I think green is the ugliest color of highlighter. I wouldn't be taking that conversation anywhere. It would sit stagnant and still and go in circles. And we do not want that as scholars, as thinkers, as writers. We have to talk about what she has to say, and then I have to say something at least slightly different, right? Sure, green is an ugly color for highlighter, but have you ever tried using yellow and see how quickly it fades and how fast you got to get another color highlighter? Yellow is the worst, right? And then somebody else will say, no, I don't like blue because I can't see anything when I highlight it, right? So we all are in this conversation. We're all talking about something similar, being highlighters and reading, but we all have our own contribution that is slightly different. And so in the same vein, right, even though Davis, DuVernay, Alexander, Baldwin, and Marable are all talking about race, justice, the social contract, the law, et cetera, they have different things to say about it, even when they're agreeing, right? Even when they're agreeing, they may be agreeing from different vantage points. So keep that in mind and think about where he lands. If we're going to think of that conversation as like a radar, right? Where's his blip on the radar screen? The next one, I love the Einstein analogy he employs. I think it's great. So read through that, make sure you understand it, and be able to answer this question. What connection is he making between Einstein's discoveries and how we should approach Black political culture? In other words, he's using an analogy, and we've talked about that in Everything's an Argument in the textbook, right? Talked about analogies. What's the analogy there? If A is Einstein is to B is, you know, whatever, then Black political culture is to other thing, right? Just like you had to do for the SATs. or whatever, 10 billion standardized tests they make you take, which are, essentially sound and fury signifying nothing, but that's a conversation for another day. What's the connection he's making? Anyway, I digress. And the last question, think about his conclusion, where he truly comes into his argument. Why the Janus-faced approach? And if you recall, a Janus-faced approach means you have one face looking toward the past and one face looking toward the future. And the reason why we talk about the Janus-faced approach is you have to, or at least, the idea is that you should know about this before you are going to, in order to make decisions or considerations for that. Because if you're just starting here and you're ignoring all of the past, you leave yourself at a disadvantage. And so why that approach, right? Why does he think we need to know Black history in order to change the future of American society specifically? Don't give me like the broad general answer I just gave. Be more specific, because he's specific in his conclusion. All right, so that is Marable. Those are questions to think when looking at Marable in a nutshell. I know he's a little challenging, so if you have more specific questions or you need some help, please stop by my office hours, email me, pronto me, whatever helps the most. I'm here to help. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in cyberspace. Bye. Say bye to Mariah Carey. Bye. Bye, Mariah. Bye.